Okay, so in this lesson we're going to come in here and go ahead and shade our model, and this is going to give me the opportunity to give you guys a better look at the Hypershade. Okay, and it's going to give me a better opportunity to explain some of the buttons inside of the Hypershade for you guys. Okay, so first thing we want to make sure that we go ahead and do is we want to load our plugin manager and make sure that we have our mental ray node actually loaded. And you just come up here to Windows, Setting and Preferences, Plugin Manager, and it's going to load this window. And you just want to look for your Maya to mentalray.mll file, and this will be your mental ray plugin for Maya. Okay, so let's come up here to Window, Rendering Editors, Hypershade, and we're just going to load our Hypershade node here. Okay, and I'm just clicking on the mental ray portion here so that we only get access to our mental ray nodes. Now you can see right away where we have a ton of mental ray nodes that ships with Maya. Now there will be a little bit more mental ray nodes in Maya 2012 and Maya 2013. I'm fairly sure that they've added some more utilities and some more nodes into the mental ray system, but for the most part you can see where we have a ton of mental ray nodes, and it would take me way too long to sort of explain all of them to you. So generally, for anything that you want to do inside of mental ray, whether it be adding normal maps, specular maps, ambient occlusion maps, skin shaders, all of that can pretty much be done with inside the basic utility nodes for mental ray. And you can see over here on the left where you can sort of single them out. So say something you wanted like environment textures, you can simply do that and single these out, so you can basically pick and choose what you would need specifically. Okay, so let's just come back here to our full mental ray tab here. Now you can see where I have my work area basically maximized, and there's a couple different ways to go ahead and do this. Now if you wanted to maximize, you know, the portion where all your shaders are actually in the scene, you want to see exactly what all your shaders are in the scene and you don't necessarily need the work area, you can just come over here to the top left and click this first button, and that's going to maximize the top portion of your Hypershade. But we want to go ahead here and maximize the work area of our Hypershade, so we just, you know, go ahead and select this middle button, which shows the outline of the top here, indicating that we're only going to get the bottom portion here. Okay, so now we have a rather large work area here. So let's come in here and just grab a MIA Material X Passes, and this is going to give us the ability to go ahead and basically shade our model fairly quickly here. Okay, so with that selected, I'm going to hit Control A to open up the attribute editor, and you can see where there's a lot of information for these shaders inside of the attribute editor here. Let me go ahead and just maximize this a little bit here, and I'll go ahead and try and move that off screen so that we can at least see our watch. Now you can always create your shaders from scratch, but the nice thing with mental ray is that it has a lot of different presets to where it's going to allow you to shade your models fairly quickly, or also if you're want to make a different variation of a shader or texture that's out there, it's going to allow you to basically bring in a base shader and then edit the parameters of the attributes to go ahead and create shaders that are going to be more specific to anything that you do inside of Maya. So let's come up here to the Presets tab and just click on this, and you can see where we have chrome, copper, frosted glass, and so on down the list. And if you just, you know, say we're going to be using chrome here and select chrome, you can simply replace the original shader with a chrome shader and then just simply edit some of the attributes here to get the chrome that you would actually want. Okay, so our reflection, we want it to basically be white. Chrome is a very, very reflective material, so one is probably going to be maybe just a little bit too high, so maybe something like 0.6 should be good for us. The glossiness of that reflection, and you can see if I adjust this here, you can see where the glossy specular highlight is actually going to change here. So that would be something more like a brushed chrome, and this will be something like a very, very shiny chrome. So we want something, say, in between here. Okay. So 0.775 should be good for us. You can also control the glossy samples, and let's just jump this up to something like 15 should be good here. Your refraction is more geared towards something like glass. Okay, so if we turn this white, you can see where this is sort of going to be see-through, and I'm not sure if you can really see that, but that sort of eliminates the actual shade on the model there. Okay, let's just jump down here to our anisotropy, and you can see where this is going to change the actual specular highlight that's on the model. Okay. Your translucency is geared towards the translucency of the shader. Your ambient occlusion is basically the ambient occlusion that's inside of the shader. Your bump map is geared towards bump maps inside of Maya. So if you're running a low res model with the high res details, you would actually be using a bump map. Okay, so let's just come back up here to the top here, and go ahead and just try and move this off the screen here. And let's just go ahead and select all of our chrome parts here. Okay, and I also want to select these small pieces and everything except for the face there, but that's okay. I can simply just add a different shader to it there. Okay, so with that stuff selected, let's just go ahead here and right click on our shader, and we're going to assign the material to the selected objects basically. And you can see where that has now turned black, indicating that we've applied that shader to our model. Okay, so let's just clear the workspace here, and we're basically just going to come up here and hit the eraser tool, which is just going to clear our graph. Okay, so let's come in here and create another material, and we will come in here and use another preset to go ahead and create the rubber material for our model. So let's come down here to rubber, and you can see automatically where it turns that rubber black, but you can always change that color to, say something if you wanted green. So this is going to give you a greenish rubber. Okay, but we don't necessarily want a green rubber. We're going to be using that black material there. Okay, so let's just go ahead and apply this. You can also rename your shaders as well, so let's just say that this is our rubber material. Just making sure that you hit enter after the last letter that you've put into this slot here. Okay, let's clear our graph again and create our final material here, which is going to be our plastic material. So we want a glossy plastic for our face, and we're just going to come up here and turn this white, and we're going to turn the reflectivity down. We don't want it that reflective. Okay, so we'll just come in here and select our white pieces here. Okay, and we will go ahead and apply this to those, and now you can see where we have our watch pretty much shaded except for the glass. Okay, so let's come in here and create one last material, and we'll come up here to the presets and choose something like glass thick. So this is going to give us a thicker glass for our object, and let's go ahead and bring our glass back, and we will go ahead and apply this to our glass. And now that we have our model completely shaded here, oops, except for the back, go ahead and reopen the Hypershade there, and I'm going to grab this main body, and I'm just going to graph the nodes so that I know exactly what shader is applied there. So we'll just go ahead and reapply that shader to the back, and now that we have our model completely shaded out, we're ready to go ahead and render here. I'm not necessarily going to walk you through setting up an entire scene for rendering our model, but we're going to use a background, and we'll just do the general rendering here. Okay, so I'm just going to import a background mesh for myself. Oops, I got to make sure that my FBX is actually loaded here. And FBX Maya, just make sure that that's loaded and auto loaded. And we'll go ahead and import that mesh. You can see that that brings it in fairly large. And this is just something that I use for rendering out any model that I do inside of Maya. And I'll just go ahead and scale this down, put it into place here. I'm not too worried about the actual image plane here, because the image plane isn't going to render. Okay, so with that in place here, let's come in here and take a look at some of our rendering settings. And we need to make sure that we're going to be using Mental Ray to go ahead and render out our model. And once you change that render using tab, you will see that you get a bunch of different tabs inside of Maya. And this is going to allow us to control a lot of the attributes at render time. Okay, so the first thing that we want to make sure that we're going to do is we want to render out an image that's fairly large, and you can change the size to either a preset that's in Maya, which something like 720 is going to be fairly large. 1080 is going to be 1980 by 1260, I think it is. But I want to set a fairly large image, and I want to do that independently here. So I'm going to use something like 3650 by 1828, which is going to give us a rather large image to go ahead and render out. We're not going to be using the Maya default light, so we can just go ahead and turn that off. Okay, take a look at our passes. If you wanted to set up things like an ambient occlusion pass, a specular pass, and so on, you can simply do that by clicking this top button, and just say we wanted to render out an ambient occlusion pass. You would just simply hit create and close, and now we're going to be able to not only render out our Keller pass, but also an ambient occlusion pass here. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead and set this to non-renderable, because I don't want to actually render out an ambient occlusion pass here. Jump into our features tab here. Okay, and you can see where we're going to be able to turn things on, like our final gathering, which is just going to take light information from an image that you would be using to render out your scene. So if you were using an image to actually light your scene, that's what your final gathering would be. Your ambient occlusion is obviously just like an ambient occlusion pass, okay, or something like your caustics. And the best way to describe caustics would be basically like a pool, where the sun would be shining through the water, and you would get the caustic information on the bottom of the pool. Let's just jump here into our quality tab, and you can see right away where you have a bunch of different quality presets inside of Maya here. So by default it comes out as draft, and draft is going to be a very low res image whenever you render out. It's not necessarily going to be a high res production image, and we would want our render here to be a production render. So we'll just turn our quality here to production, and this is going to preset a bunch of different settings here to give us a higher quality image. Our anti-aliasing here at 2, this is going to try to reduce the amount of noise inside of your scene, and it's going to do a good job, though I tend to use things like 4. 4 is a very, very crisp image. Okay, let's just go ahead and take a look at our shadows node here. This is going to allow you to control the amount of shadows that are in your scene, or how hard those shadows are. Your motion blur would, like it says, would be for motion blur inside of Maya, and we're not necessarily going to take a look at that. Okay, but we are going to use our indirect lighting here, and I want to light my scene with, like I said, an image here. So I'm just going to use the image based lighting tab, and we're going to go ahead and hit create here. Okay, and you can see where it allows you to plug an image file in here. So we're just going to go ahead here and select an image, and I'm just going to go to my desktop and just grab an image here. And if we go ahead and scale down here, you can also edit the color gain and the color offset of that image. We're not necessarily going to do that because we're just going to use the standard defaults here. Okay, so let's just go ahead and close this out. It should also be noted that once you use your image-based lighting or any type of image to light your model or light your scene inside of Maya, you have to turn on your final gathering, because you're not going to get control of the lighting information that's actually inside of that image unless you use your final gathering. So we have to go ahead and make sure that we turn that on. The accuracy of that final gather, something like 100 is fairly good to go ahead and render out, but in this case I want to use something maybe 250, and this is just going to give us a better quality image. Okay, your final gathering map is all for things like if you wanted to see your final gathering map specifically, you can sort of render that out and take a look at how that final gathering is working inside of the scene. Your filter is sort of going to be like the anti-aliasing filter inside of Maya, where this is going to allow you to adjust the quality of that filter. So something like 1 should be good, and maybe 2 would actually be better, but we're just going to go ahead here and stay at 1. Okay, and we can just go ahead and close the rest of this. I think we're ready to go ahead and actually render here. Okay, so let me go ahead and just bring up our rendering window, and you can see where we get a fairly large rendering window, and this is because of the size that we have set inside of Maya. Okay, so I'm just going to go ahead here and you can see that we're pinching through the ground there. Let me just go ahead and move this up a little bit. I'm just going to go ahead and hit render here. I'm going to pause the video. I'm not going to let it render completely out, though I will come back once it spits out an image here to the render view, and then we'll come back and talk about it a little bit. So let me go ahead and pause the video, and I'm going to go ahead and hit render. Okay, so now with our image basically spit out to our render view here, you can see that we have one minor problem, and this is because the stopwatch button here on the top left, this just indicates that our normals aren't actually facing the correct way. And I did this on purpose because I wanted you guys to take a look at what would happen if our normals would actually facing the wrong way here, whereas you won't get actually any color inside of the model from the shader that we applied, and that's simply just because our normals are facing in rather than facing out. So if we come in here and actually just go ahead here and reverse our normals here, and I simply just made a shelf button here. Now if we rendered that out, we would actually get the same color information that's on this side. Okay, you can see right away specifically where Mental Ray actually does a fairly good job of rendering out an image for us. Obviously there's definitely going to be need for some adjustment here, also on the background where it's still a little edgy, and this is because there's no smooth node applied to this, and you can just simply come up here to modify, convert smooth mesh to polygons, and that'll just give you a quick way of adding a smooth node to your model. You can also do that through the Mental Ray approximation editor, which is probably a little bit more complex than we really need to actually go into here. But for the most part, you can see where, like I said, this produces a fairly decent image for us. And like I said, Mental Ray can do a fairly good job of rendering out our image here. Our final image that I'm actually going to be using for the ad is going to be rendered out through V-Ray. And I'm not going to walk you through V-Ray simply because V-Ray doesn't actually ship with Maya. It's an external application or an external plugin that you would actually have to buy for Maya. I wouldn't suggest buying it right away if you're a beginner to Maya, simply because it's fairly advanced, and it's also fairly complex, and it's not necessarily meant for beginners inside of Maya. But generally Mental Ray will give you the ability to go ahead and render out some very high quality images, and um, I hope you guys have enjoyed some of these lessons. Um, and we're also going to have some appending lessons that are going to cover, like I said, the animation side, or like the animation module, some of the dynamics. In my 2012 and 2013, I think there's also N here, and then particles that are a little bit different than the actual dynamic system inside of my 2011. We'll go ahead and take a look at those as well. Maybe not necessarily all the way to 2013, because I think it's changed in 2012 a little bit to where I can talk to you a little bit about those. But for the most part, that's pretty much our tutorial, and I hope you guys have enjoyed watching this. I hope you haven't been necessarily overwhelmed in the tutorial, because there's definitely a lot of information in this tutorial to get you guys started. As a final note, I would just say that I've been using Maya for for nearly 6 years, 7 years, and I still don't necessarily have it all mastered. The only way to really master Maya is basically just jump into it, and it's going to take a lot of time for you guys to really master the application. I'm by no means a master artist when it comes to using Maya, so the best suggestion I can make to you there is just, like I said, just start using it, and just get used to it, and just keep doing it and doing it and doing it, and the more you do, the better off you're eventually going to get. So yeah, I want to give a big thanks out to Ben Tate, also Chris Tate over at CG Touch Plus, for allowing me to go ahead and bring this tutorial to you guys, and I hope that, like I said, you've enjoyed it, and thanks for watching.